What I would say to this community of Somalians who've arrived here in America, don't follow our example when it comes to gangbanging. Don't follow it. Even in the wars that we're involved in this very minute as the United States of America, the number of men who die every day will not touch the number of African American males that die every day in the streets of America at the hands of one another. As they talk about today, America lost 3 men. Today, America lost 7 men. If you count us up from the East Coast to the West Coast, we will lose 50, 60, 70 people every day that America is here. Our confusion is different than yours. We were taught to hate ourselves, not like or love ourselves in this country. We was raised in an education that didn't talk about us in any glowing or great way, only a negative way. And too many of us still have slave values. And when you think about slavery itself, you would think as many people as we lost in slavery, we would learn the value of one another from what we went through as men and women and children. As a matter of fact, when they started this initiative of stealing us from Mother Africa and bringing us here, that period alone was 150 years of stealing African people and bringing them to America to make them slaves. And once we became slaves, we stayed in slavery for 250 years. On the voyage alone between the east coast of Africa, the west coast of Africa to the east coast of America, we lost more than 100 million people in that water alone. Every ship carried 400 to 500 African people, shackled together closer than you are in those chairs, not allowed to get up to go to the restroom, not allowed a decent meal or a clean drink of water. As a matter of fact, out of a cargo of 400 to 500, they were lucky to get 70 to 100 to the shores of America, to the slave block that survived the voyage. So many of us went down in that water, you could walk across the bottom of that ocean from West Africa to East America on the bones of our ancestors at the bottom of that water. You think we died enough, but because we didn't learn enough about our humanity and we weren't taught enough about loving ourselves, we have fell in this bed with the devil of murdering one another from coast to coast in this country. Right down the highway is a city called Chicago. And when Chicago came to Minnesota, a bloodbath began because of what the gentleman said at the table over there. That the gangs in Chicago came up that highway into Minnesota. Last year alone, they killed over 590 some people. They shot over 2,000. Everything that goes on in Chicago will go on in Minnesota. Now here's where we are. The men and women. And I won't forget the young people who are trying this self to save one another. But it's the men and women's responsibility to come to the table and make up your mind to say the right things to your young boys and young girls, to challenge them with their right to be in the street with all this madness, to take away the guns in the house, to take away the drugs in the house, to pull the children out of the street, to tell the children when they have to come home, to know where your children are going and who your children are hanging out with. The fact that you don't is the reason so many are dying. When a black mother goes in a bedroom and finds a gun, she simply comes out and asks her son, "What is this?" and never takes the gun and begins some form of punishment. If she finds a dope bag, she said, "I'm not having this in my house," but leaves it right there to him and tells him, "I don't want that in my house." Anytime you sanction something or govern something or give them the right, they will continue. You as the adults have to challenge the young people every step of the way when it comes to this madness. I'm in a community in North Minneapolis where we've lost a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 2 11-year-olds, and no one is saying nothing. No mothers, no fathers are talking to the gun runners. No mothers or fathers are talking to the gangbangers. No mothers or fathers are coming forward to make sure that we even know who slaughtered those children. One sleeping on a couch, 3 years old. One going up the stairs carrying a plate of food, 5 years old. And we're acting like they don't matter to us. We've always been a loving, caring people, African people. But as you move from being African people into something else you have no business, you have no love for self. We've moved from calling ourselves African people from using the N-words on our own self. Matter of fact, coming from the South, my family came from the South. where the worst treatment of our people was inflicted on us. So we had a boogeyman. The boogeyman wore a big white hat, big white robe. He had a giant cross in the middle of his chest. He had a whip and a gun and a Bible. The name of his organization was the KKK. In the 1980s, the boogeyman returned. He had on a long white t-shirt down to his knees. He had a pair of blue jeans and a pair of tennis shoes. He had a giant cross in the middle of his chest. He had a 9mm in one hand and a bag of dope, and he was using the N-word on us, and he was killing us the same way. The difference, it was me killing me. We have to understand, to come out of this, it has to come from us. We live in communities where there's no gun factories. There's no gun warehouses. There's no gun wholesale houses. There's no gun stores. So ask yourself this question: who is it bringing all these guns into your community and giving them to your children, and for what reason are they giving them to your children? Who is it that's bringing guns in your community that belong in war? All of a sudden, military weapons showing up on the streets of black communities all over America, and you ain't caught on to it yet. You might go to a store in your community and run out of milk. You might even run out of eggs to tomorrow, but you never run out of guns and bullets. Someone's behind that. And you are allowing your young people to participate in your own demise. It's one thing for someone to have a conspiracy to get rid of you. It's another thing for you to participate in it. Wake up as a people. Speak to your young people. Don't be afraid of your young people. We told them to be in before dark. Now the adults are running in before dark. Speak and challenge your young people. Any of you young men here today, and I want you to be honest. How many of you are already affiliated with any kind of street organizations like that? Raise your hand if you're here today. Don't be afraid. Raise your hand. Come on, be men. There's men in this room. Raise your hand. Don't play games, raise your hand. I'm waiting on you. Be a man about what you do. If you're dirty enough to do it in the dark, raise your hand in the light. Raise your hand. Because I know you're here. And if you ain't here, you know somebody's in. If you know somebody's in, raise your hand. Only one? If you know somebody's been harmed by it, raise your hand. If you know somebody's been shot by it, raise your hand. If you know somebody's been killed by it, raise your hand. That has to change. And I don't care about you not having the courage to raise your hand. The attitude has to change. That you think you have the right, like you James Bonds with a license to kill. You ain't a judge, you ain't sanctioned. You ain't a marshal, you ain't sanctioned. You ain't the CIA or the FBI, you're not sanctioned to commit murder on America's streets. So what we want from you is responsibility. It is our generation's responsibility to make sure you can go to school and get an education. Make sure you can go to college and get a degree. Make sure you come out of that and can get a good job. It's not our responsibility to allow you to murder and assassinate yourself. It's our responsibility to stand up to you, even if you shoot me. You can't be bigger than me. You can't replace me. You can't look down on me, but I've got to speak to you. I lead you into the future, and you make the next future for the next generation. No different than I had to do at 17 years old. So we got to speak directly to you. And we got to say to you, young men in this room, you go speak to each other and keep speaking to each other till we get a lid on this. Keep organizing with these young people till you get a lid on this to say, no, stop the violence. No, stop the murder. Stop looking one another in the face as your natural enemy looking like you. You got one child over here, mother and father working as hard as they can to get their child through. You got another group of family over here trying to do the same thing for their family, and everybody is shooting everybody who is suffering the same. It's time to come up. It's time to make a change. I'm sorry I don't see a lot of elders here, but you have to demand that the elders come out the closet. You have to demand that all the spiritual leaders, especially if you follow them, that they come out of the closet, because this is going to take God in the middle of what you do. You're not going to do this without Allah. It's not going to happen. Your foundation has to be a moral foundation. It has to be a spiritual foundation to fight a devil this big. You have to put God in the middle of this movement, and you have to make a movement, and you have to move on saving the lives of young people who are from Africa with this skin color. Do your best to allow this to live. Don't take this from us. Allow this to live. In closing, what we were taught for generations was that God Almighty came down and reached to the miry clay and fashioned man in his image. The pathologists, the scientists, historians, every time they research it, they find the first man was us. They find that the bones of Methuselah and Lucy was us. They find that the part of the world where we come from was the first part for mankind. And as we come through history, being the first people who gave the world so much, today we're going out backwards. First writing came from us, reading and writing. First math came from us. Most countries got 2 to 3 music scales. We got 72 to 73.